Caleb and I do see eye to eye on a lot of things, but not some things. And so at our 3:45 a.m. production meeting this morning, we're like, hey, let's talk about rivalries. And I'm like, well, Tennessee's the rivalry school. They've got rivalries everywhere. They can't have any more rivalries. And Caleb's saying, oh, you know what I love are those neutral site rivalries. And I'm like, I hate them. And he goes, Tennessee should do one of those. I'm like, no, they shouldn't. I'm like,
what the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Should the Vols consider an annual neutral site rivalry game? I hate the fact that Florida and Georgia's played in Jacksonville. I say absolutely not. Caleb changed my mind.
So,
and this comes from, the Cotton Bowl is going to keep Texas and Oklahoma through 2036.
Yes, this comes because the Oklahoma and Texas have extended the Cotton Bowl through 2036. And I'm usually not a fan of neutral site games. One, I think you're giving away money. And because you usually make more money doing a home and home than you do splitting revenue for a neutral site game every year. So on paper, just in principle, I'm for the home and homes. However, Dave, I think from a recruiting perspective, if Tennessee still is playing Georgia annually in 2 years, I think they should address maybe playing that game in Atlanta. And I don't care if it's closer to Georgia. Tennessee having a presence in Atlanta every single year.
That was the one that made sense this morning in our meeting. So should the Vols considering neutral? So now would Georgia do that? Consider a neutral site game in the Mercedes-Benz Dome?
Okay, how about this? This would be so controversial. Make a deal with Georgia. Would you give Georgia 60% of the tickets in Tennessee 40 and just willingly play a slight road game every year to have that recruiting presence in Atlanta?
No. I mean, I would split them even. Why?
So
you think? I don't think Georgia's going to fight this. Why do you think Georgia's going to fight this? I mean, if Tennessee called them up, that they would be like, heck yeah, let's do it.
Because Georgia would lose out on their home game. Again, home and homes are better, and Georgia's already got a neutral site game in Jacksonville. Georgia would lose out on potential every other year revenue that they get from home games. And again, the revenue you get from one home game every other year outweighs the revenue you get from a neutral site game every year. And typically in college football, largely because neutral site games are played at NFL stadiums are slightly smaller than college stadiums as it is. But then also the neutral site games, you got to pay promoters. Promoters put these games on a lot of times and things like that. So I think that look, ideally 50-50, but if Georgia's hesitant, maybe agree to give them a little bit more of the ticket sales, because look, Tennessee having a presence in Atlanta every year would be huge.
Well, I don't think Georgia would fight it. I think they would be fine with it. I think the TV.
Well, then do it.
Well, at the end of the day, I don't know that Tennessee should do it. I mean, I see your point. I'm not saying I hate it. I'm not saying I love it, but I wouldn't do it. I think a home game in Neyland Special is way too special. I think a home game in Neyland Stadium gives you, and we've talked about this before, gives you 5 points in a point spread, as opposed to most home fields give you 2 or 3. So I wouldn't give up the Neyland Stadium every other year.
I think recruiting in Atlanta also gives you a 5-point spread, but that's just me. And what I would think about this, because I thought about this with Oklahoma and Texas. Texas has better recruiting, but historically and now, you would say recency and historically, Oklahoma's been the better program, right, than Texas?
Well, yes.
They've been able to do that because they've been able to recruit Texas. They compete with Texas for Texas recruits. You don't think them playing that annual game in Dallas is a huge reason they're doing that?
I think it helps. I think it also helps the coaches that they've had hired. I mean, if you look at Tennessee, why did Tennessee do so well in Atlanta recruiting with Philip Fulmer? It wasn't because they played a neutral site game. It was because they had Drunken Ray Goff and they had Jim Donnan as their head coach. And then Tennessee continued to win battles against Mark Richt, who was much better than the other two guys I mentioned. But I think that's the best way is Kirby Smart to go somewhere else. I think you would agree with that. But as far as a neutral site game, other options that might be out there, is there any other one that really floats your boat, or is that the only one? I can't think of another one that makes a lot of sense for Tennessee, but I'll give you that this one makes sense. And as far as the money, the money's not going to get in the way because you have a little crew down there called the Chick-fil-A Bowl Committee, and they were one of the best run bowls, even though they weren't the upper end bowls, upper echelon like the Rose Bowl and stuff. They would find a way to make that happen. I mean, if there's some way they could attach a sponsorship to it, they would do that. And then the television revenue would offset that. So I don't really think the gate would be a factor. I think home field advantage would be a factor, but I don't think the gate in either place would be a monstrous factor. I mean, you're probably talking about, what do you make on the gate? I mean, back when I was covering it, you made about $1 million on the gate.
I have no idea.
So let's say with inflation, you make $3 million. A game like that you could get title sponsored in November, especially like it happened this past year. Oh my goodness. I mean, at what point do we see some of these neutral site games because of money come with endorsements? The Tennessee Georgia rivalry brought to you by Chick-fil-A. How about them nuggets?
Well, that's what
check out my nuggets. I got the dogs and balls.
Oh my gosh. That's what Arkansas was hoping to, because Arkansas plays Texas A&M at Jerry World every year. Reportedly Texas A&M hates that and they want the home and home back. They want to go back to a home and home. Arkansas has no problem going to Jerry World and playing in Texas every year. But okay, another one. What about from a lesser degree? Would you, since it's not that special of a home game anyway, because it's Kentucky, would you consider playing Kentucky at a neutral site game outside of the state of Tennessee? Because Kentucky, one thing they've done recently, every now and then they've picked off an elite player out of East Tennessee. I mean, Randall Cobb is the most notable example of that. And,
right.
Knoxville,
give me another.
I actually think, isn't there?
I mean, Tennessee has a lot. Randall Cobb is the one shining example.
That was a big one to get him out of Alcoa.
When Tennessee didn't offer him though until like January, second week in January, and then Trooper Taylor goes to Oklahoma State, and he was the guy that recruited him, and that's why that blew up. But I mean, Kentucky's not coming down into Tennessee recruiting territory and winning battles against the Vols. And as a matter of fact, they're lucky to win battles against the Vols in the Commonwealth.
Well, there's not a lot of talent in the Commonwealth to win battles agast, to be honest.
I would say this.
Andre Woodson's probably the only one.
How about this idea? If you're looking for something, what if you played, when did they get the new stadium for the Titans? Because I hate the stadium now.
They get that, I think it's 20, I don't know exactly. It's like 3 years down the road still.
Now, I know you're not very big on, I feel like Nashville recruiting is going to eventually break through the glass ceiling. I know you've gotten history and you've talked about it, how those guys have not panned out and it's overrated. And historically, you're absolutely correct. I just believe at some point numbers are numbers and you're going to have that change. And they're eventually going to be that Nashville is going to be so big, it can't not be a great recruiting area, if that makes sense. So
I mean, New York City's not a great recruiting area and it's the biggest city in the country and it's a terrible recruiting area. When's the last good player that came out of New York City?
You got me. I mean, you can't play football in New York City. You can play football around Nashville. You've got space. You don't have space in New York City.
They have space. They built. Trust me. They've got space. They find ways to squeeze in football stadiums all over that city.
But not a bunch of. No, wait a second.
Well, okay. How about this? North Jersey.
Wait. Whoa. Don Bosco is in Jersey. Now, would you consider them a New York school? Because
yes, New York area.
Hold on, Jarrett Garantano's dad was a cop in New York City. So, do you consider Jarrett Garantano a New York City prospect?
Yes, New York City area kids. And are you telling me North Jersey has good football? Because I don't think
Don Bosco does. I mean, Don Bosco puts out about 5 or 6 guys a year.
Pennsylvania and Ohio and Maryland and Michigan all put out more talent than the New York area. And I mean, who came out of Connecticut that's good? That's in the New York area. Is there a high school in Connecticut you've heard of? I haven't. This is the largest metro area in the country, and the football's pathetic there. Well, by the way, the third largest third largest metro area in the country, Chicago. Football's not good there either.
Yeah.
Who's good that came out of Northern Illinois?
Point being, I think Nashville will prove to be a solid recruiting ground. I'm not saying it takes over Dade County in South Florida, but I'm saying that it'll be a solid recruiting ground, if not very good. And if just the numbers alone would lead me to believe that. And if Tennessee wants to play a neutral site game, that might be the place to do it. You might call Kentucky and say, would you like to play in Nashville? But do you help Kentucky? And all this comes from Texas. If you're just tuning in, Texas and Oklahoma are going to continue to play in the Cotton Bowl. I could see that. I really could see, Tennessee has this issue going on with Memphis that I think stems from basketball. They've had issues there. We know Rick Barnes. Jimmy Himes broke that. Rick Barnes had the issue with Memphis and he wasn't going to play them anymore. But that would be a great opponent that you beat most of the time, and you could play in Nashville. I know that's non-conference, but how's that float your boat?
I think Tennessee would rather do a home and home with Memphis because they're already going to Nashville every other year, and they'd rather that way they could actually get into Memphis and recruit Mississippi some too at that point. So that's actually been the fights with Tennessee and Memphis. Memphis has always wanted to do neutral site games with Tennessee in football and basketball, and Tennessee has never wanted to do neutral site games with Memphis. They want the home and home. And because Memphis doesn't like Tennessee going into Memphis and recruiting that city. So Calipari hated that in basketball. That drove him crazy. And the same with Josh Pastner was that was the biggest reason the rivalry ended both times. Nashville. Yeah. Okay. Putting aside my thoughts that Nashville talent is overrated, you're right. Players will at least some come out of there. At that point, playing Kentucky and Nashville helps Kentucky more than it helps Tennessee because Tennessee has more of a lock on Nashville than Kentucky does. So I don't think you would play Kentucky and Nashville. So that's the big thing. I would just say that Nashville is again, where are people moving to Nashville from, Dave? Nashville's growing because people from New York City and the New York area are moving to Nashville. Well, nobody in the New York area can play football. It's a soft, weak football area. I bet I could start at football on a high school football team in New York City or in New York. So
would bet you couldn't.
I'm saying New York football is terrible. So Nashville's growing with people moving away from other regions. Those regions don't have good football. You're not having families with elite athletes moving to Nashville. You're having theater nerds move to Nashville. Nothing wrong with theater nerds, okay? But life is not High School Musical where you can be a basketball star and a theater nerd at the same time. And Nashville's getting the theater nerds, not the football players.
No, they're not.